The island of Cozumel, known as Mexico's crown jewel, is a glistening tropical paradise, famous for its lush greenery, white sandy beaches, and warm blue waters. It is ranked among the world's top diving destinations, attracting thousands of visitors annually. Amongst these was the English pop star and songwriter Kirsty MacColl, who, like many celebrities, enjoyed the island for its laid-back atmosphere. In 2000, Kirsty began working with the BBC on an 8-part radio documentary series on Cuban music and culture, as it was very clear from her music that she has a passion for the music scene in Latin America. The series was recorded in Havana, the capital of Cuba, and featured Kirsty interviewing some of the most famous Cuban musicians, including some members of the Bonavista Social Club. Later, in December 2000, after 18 months of non-stop filming, Kirsty needed a long overdue break. Passionate about water sports, she chose Cozumel. This trip, her third, would be especially enjoyable since she planned to introduce her sons, Jamie, 15, and Louis, 13, to scuba diving. It would certainly be a holiday to remember, but in the worst possible way imaginable. Cozumel is an island off the east coast of Mexico's Yucatan Peninsula, with its economy based mostly around tourism. One of the main reasons that people visit the Cozumel is to go scuba diving or snorkeling, as it boasts one of the most diverse coral reefs, the second largest in the world, that is home to over 1,000 species. On December the 11th, 2000, Kirsty, her boyfriend, musician James Knight, and 2 sons flew out to Cozumel, Mexico, due to return on December the 20th, just before Christmas. On December the 18th, around 2 p.m., 2 days before they were due to return home, Kirsty and her sons headed out to the Chunganab Reef, a 67,000-acre designated diving area, protected by the National Maritime Park of Cozumel since 1996. The area is extremely popular among tourists, restricted to only access to swimmers, divers, and their dive boats, with a speed limit of 4 knots, which is equivalent to about 4 miles per hour on land. Kirsty's boyfriend, James, chose to spend his day relaxing at their rented villa. Kirsty and her 2 sons head out to a boat called the Scuba Shack, led by an experienced dive master of 30 years, Ivan Diaz. About 300 meters offshore, the group stopped above the reef and began their first dive. All in all, the diving part went rather well. They explore the beautiful marine life the reef has to offer, even going down to the famous 14-foot underwater statues, the Christ, Chacmol, Mayan god of rain, and the Virgin Mary. Certified divers also had the option to be led into a cave, named La Quebrada. This is the only cave you can dive through from the shore in Cozumel. Kirsty had been scuba diving many times before, but neither her and her 2 sons had the experience needed for the cave, so they stuck to the Chunganab Reef. Kirsty's son seemed to enjoy it as much as Kirsty did, although Louis, her younger son, later said that something felt off the entire day, an ominous sense of dread he just could not shake. When the family rose to the surface after completing their 30-minute dive, the dive master Ivan noticed something was amiss. About a quarter of a mile away, heading straight towards them at high speed, was a 31-foot motorboat called the Percolito and showed no signs of stopping. Ivan in complete shock, thinking to himself that surely the boat's captain would see the divers and swerve to avoid them, or at least try and slow down. He started waving his arms and began yelling for the boat to stop, but there was no one up front looking out. Kirsty turned and noticed the boat heading towards her eldest son, Jamie. It was travelling so fast that its prow was raised high out of the water. There was no way the driver would have seen Jamie in time. Kirsty swam forward and pushed her son out of the boat's path, shouting for him to look out. The boat slammed through the group, hitting the dive master Ivan in the chest and injuring Jamie. There was a loud crack as the boat's propeller hit Kirsty's diving equipment, and the sea began to turn an opaque red with her blood. Ivan then quickly ushered the 2 boys back on the boat, urging them not to look behind them. The 2 children saw, however, the worst thing they could possibly see: Kirsty's body floating face down in the water, practically chopped in half by the boat's powerful propellers. Louis recalls, on the first dive, about 2 p.m, we all went down together. There were wonderful things there. I came up to the surface first. Mummy was next to me. I said, "Wow." She smiled and said, "Great." Then she suddenly screamed, "Look out!" and tried to push us out of the way. The boat was already over us. I could see the propellers. I was swimming in Mummy's blood. I heard Jamie shout, "Where's Mummy?" I screamed that she'd been hit, and to swim the other way and not look back. The boat, Percolito, did not stop. It drove another 300 feet until it was forced to come to a halt due to the damage sustained when Kirsty's diving equipment bent a metal bar that impeded the propeller's action. The captain of a nearby diver boat called the Nazareno, who witnessed the entire accident and did his best to maneuver his boat into the path of the Percolito, went over to the Percolito and demanded to know why they were on the reef. The captain replied, "I didn't see any boys." Ivan and the two boys were in a state of shock, unable to move and to speak. The captain of the Nazareno, Philip Putt, radioed the port captain, requesting an ambulance, but he knew it would be no use. Kirsty was already dead. Those on the Percolito never made any attempts to help. They stayed around 15 yards away from the scene, watching on the whole time. When the paramedics arrived, the scene was reportedly so gruesome that one of the operators threw up at the sight. Two later autopsy reports, one performed in Mexico and one in London, revealed that Kirsty had practically been sliced in half from the back of her neck all the way down to her waist, with parts of her left leg and chest severed. James, still back at the villa, was called and informed there had been an accident, but little other information was given to him. When he headed down to the Playa Corona, the beach Kirsty's body had been brought onto, still no information had been given to him. It was left to Kirsty's two teenage sons to inform Jamie of the tragic accident. When the police arrived at Playa Corona, they spoke to those on board the Percolito as well as Ivan Diaz. Ivan later recalled the police officers asking those on board the Percolito who was driving the boat, who was in charge of the boat. One man responded, I am the owner of the boat, and was the one who was driving at the time of the accident. This man was 67-year-old Gomea Gonzalez Nova, who was at the time Mexico's 7th richest person. He was the chairman of a company called Controladora Comercial Mexicana, Mexico's second-largest food retailer at the time. Gonzalez Nova had a holiday home in Cozumel for nearly 40 years, so he would have been well aware of the restrictions placed around that area of the reef. On board the boat was Gonzalez Nova, his two sons, his daughter-in-law, his 10-month-old granddaughter, and a 26-year-old boat hand called Jose Sanyam. Police led Gonzalez and his family away for questioning. Within hours of the accident, Gonzalez Nova's lawyer had flown in from Mexico City, and they made sure that the family was first to give their witness statements, leaving many other key witnesses, including Ivan Diaz, waiting for days to give their statements. Felipe Putt, the captain of the Nazareno, later stated that it wasn't until 8 days after the accident that he was asked to come in and give his statement. Despite the fact that he had been a key witness and the man that had called it in, Ivan was questioned for 3 days until his statement was completed, although he later claimed that, initially, police had given him a blank piece of paper and asked him to sign it, saying they would fill in the rest later. Ivan refused, saying he was not going to put his name on a piece of paper before knowing exactly what he was agreeing to. Hours after the accident, and despite the fact that many witnesses overheard Gonzalez Nova claim that he had been the one driving the boat at the time of the accident, someone else came forward to say they were responsible. The boat hand, Jose Sanyam. Sanyam claimed that he was only driving at about 1 knot or approximately 1 mile per hour, but he didn't see any trace of divers or dive boats at the scene, and that he was under the impression that they were not in an area of the Chunkanab Reef, that they were much further out to sea. Not only this, but he claimed that after only 10 minutes had another boat arrived on the scene of the accident. This was a lie, as well as the Scuba Shack, the boat that Kirsty and her sons had gone out on that day. There were 2 other dive boats in the area, the Nazareno and the Bongulus, both about 160 feet away from the accident. Not only this, but Kirsty would never have taken her 2 children out to the coral reefs that were further out to sea, as it was just too dangerous for beginner divers. The reefs further out to sea are about 3,000 feet deep and are notoriously unsafe for beginner divers, whereas the Chunkanab Reef is only about 150 feet deep and is a very popular place for newbie divers and tourists. Gonzalez Nova claimed in his statement that they were about 400 meters away from the Cozumel reef when they hit Kirsty, but he also claimed that the Red Cross had removed Kirsty and taken her to a jetty around 400 meters away. In fact, if Kirsty and her family would have been 400 meters away from the Cozumel reef, then the distance from where they were to the jetty would have actually been about 700 meters, as the Cozumel reef is 300 meters from the jetty. To give you a better idea, as can be seen on this map, just how close the designated diving area is to the shore. Therefore, they would have definitely been closer to the shore when they hit Kirsty than they claimed that they were, because Kirsty could not have been that far out to sea if this is the designated diving area. And not only this, but many witnesses contradicted the family's statement that they had only been going at around 1 knot when they hit Kirsty. Those on the nearby boats, Kirsty's sons, as well as locals who witnessed the accident, claimed that the boat was actually travelling at around 20 knots. Had the Percolito actually been driving at 1 knot, then it would have taken 18 whole seconds to go through Kirsty's group, giving them plenty of time to swim out of the way. Despite all the evidence to the contrary, Jose Sanyam was arrested and released on a $9,000 bail and then sent to trial in 2002. The trial did not have a jury, but apparently this is not uncommon in Mexico. The trial also conveniently omitted a lot of crucial evidence that directly contradicted the family statements, and many locals were afraid to come forward due to the power Gonzalez possessed in the area. Sanyam was convicted of culpable homicide and was sentenced to almost 3 years in prison. However, in Mexico, you can pay your way out of your jail sentence if your jail sentence is less than 5 years prison time, by paying 1 peso for every day you would have been imprisoned. So, in March of 2003, he was released from jail after paying $91 to avoid serving the 3-year prison term that had been handed down to him. This is a story of an incredible miscarriage of justice. A Christmas getaway of laughter and joy turned into a tragedy. The case was deliberately fast-tracked and received no publicity in Mexico in order to maintain Cozumel's lucrative tourist industry. McCall's death may have been unjustly swept under the rug, but it would be impossible to do the same to her legacy. In 2001, a bench was placed at the southern entrance of London's Soho Square in memory of Kirsty McCall. In light of the lyrics to her song, Soho Square, "One day I'll be waiting there. No empty bench in Soho Square." Thank you all for watching. Drop a comment down below. I'd like to know what you thought of this video. I hope to see you in the next one.